All right. Well, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Usually it takes some people a couple of minutes to log on, but that's okay. I first want to welcome everyone to our very first STgenetics Beef Team and Customer webinar. Last month we hosted our Beef Team webinar, and then we also hosted an additional customer webinar separately. But this month we went ahead and we combined them, and we believe that Dr. Odde is going to give a great presentation tonight that's going to be beneficial to all. So first and foremost, I'd like to introduce myself if you're new here. My name is Haley Herzog, and I am a beef marketing representative here at our headquarters in Navasota, Texas. I do most of our social media and advertising and work alongside Adel and Alan, dealing with all of our beef marketing materials. Tonight, we're honored to have Dr. Ken Odie as our guest speaker and our presenter. I'm just going to go ahead and give a brief bio of Dr. Odie, and I had to shorten this quite a bit because he's very prestigious and he has accomplished a lot in his life. But Dr. Ken Odie has spent his career serving the animal industry. Odie earned a bachelor's degree at South Dakota State University, later obtained a master's degree, and then simultaneously completed veterinary and doctoral degrees at Kansas State University. After 11 years in research, teaching at Colorado State University, and 8 years with Pfizer Animal Health and AgSpan, Dr. Odie joined North Dakota State University as professor and head of the Department of Animal and Range Sciences. He later served as department head for the Animal Sciences and Industry Development at Kansas State from 2007 to 2018, and then transitioned into a faculty role with a research and teaching appointment. Dr. Odie has authored and co-authored more than 250 journal papers, proceedings, and abstracts, experiment station publications, and technical bulletins. He has been an invitational speaker at scientific, veterinary, and producer meetings in more than 30 states and 6 foreign countries. He initiated the Superior Livestock Database in 1995, which now includes 24 years of continuous research data. He served in numerous leadership positions within professional societies, managed many college students who completed internships at Odde Ranch in South Dakota, and he is a founding member of the National Association for the Advancement of Animal Science, where he served as their president in 2016 to 2017. Dr. Odie and his wife, Arlene, maintain active roles in the management of their South Dakota ranch and have 3 children and 7 grandchildren. Dr. Odie, we are so excited to have you on our webinar tonight as our presenter. And tonight you will be discussing your final report on the field trial that you've done with STgenetics. And we can't wait to see that presentation. The first thing I'll say before I turn it over to Dr. Odie is that we just ask that everyone be respectful of his presentation. And if your mic's not muted at the moment, please do so. We're going to leave time at the end for any questions that you have for Dr. Odie or our STgenetics Beef team. And I think that's all I have for now. So Dr. Odie, if you want to go ahead and start your presentation, I'll turn it over to you.
Haley, thank you very much for the kind introduction. By the way, perhaps a bit too long. I will go ahead and share my screen and see if we
We can see it, Dr. Odie.
see it. I probably need to get it into slideshow though. Oh, okay, I think I got the wrong, I got 2 monitors here. Let me do something, just a second. When I stop share. Hope you're not seeing that one. You're seeing a blank screen now, right?
Yeah, I'm seeing your desktop blue screen.
Let me go back here again.
Okay.
Huh. I've got well, I think this will work. Let's, can you see what I have on my screen?
Yes, sir. I can see the first slide, and then it just shows a preview of the second slide as well.
Yeah, so I should be in my other screen, but I haven't figured out how to get over there. So let me try it one more time.
Okay, no problem. I think if you try from current slide.
Just go from current slide.
I think so. Try that.
Okay.
Hey, Dr. Odde.
Yeah.
If you go on the top of the screen, you'll see display settings.
Yes.
If you click on that, I think you can, you can swap presenter view.
Swap prevent. Okay, there we go.
There we go.
By the way, that gentleman that just spoke up is my co-author of my report. So he has he's helped me in a lot of ways, including rescuing me on some technology issues as well. So, well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's actually my pleasure.
Turn your microphone back on, Ken.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, sir. There we go.
Okay, let's try that. So this is a project that I'm going to talk about tonight that we mostly conducted in the summer of 2019, and obviously with Dr. Arnett's assistance here, both in terms of some support, but also in terms of how we think through what we're really trying to accomplish here. But I might just back up a little further. I actually took AI training in 1973, and I inseminated my first cows in 1973. And this is long before we had any of the technology that we actually have today. In fact, at that time, I don't think we could quite imagine the technology that we had today. So we've come a long ways in this industry, and from that point in time, and I think where you folks are at in this industry today is actually pretty exciting. So I'm just honored to be part of this, and we'll share a few thoughts here with you this evening. Okay, a little bit of an outline for what I intend to do tonight. So the first thing I'm going to do is just give you a bit of a ranch overview, because I think it's important that you kind of understand what our ranch is all about, what some of our philosophies are. Then we'll delve into the studies, the field trials that we'll talk about. And then the last thing that I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about the economics. And I use the word thoughts here. I thought the word analysis was a little too strong. We've put some things together, and I think there's some real opportunities here, but I also want you to know that we're working on some more thorough analysis of some of these questions as well. And so we hope to have more to come on that front here somewhat later. So this is a bit of what I plan to do this evening. A little bit on where we're located. So our ranch is located in north central South Dakota. We're 10 miles south of a little town called Pollock, South Dakota. We're 30 miles north of Mobridge, South Dakota. We're about 100 miles south of Bismarck, North Dakota, about 100 miles north of Pierce, South Dakota, and about 100 miles west of Aberdeen. So this is cattle country. We like to think of it as cattle country. There's a lot of cows in this region of the country. We've actually had some increasing cow numbers in this part of the country. And I might also mention that this area of the country is, for a long, long time, has had a lot of people using artificial insemination. And actually, Dr. Arnett knows this, but a lot of commercial producers in our region do actively use and have AI programs. And I'll talk about that a little later and maybe why we think that actually might be. So on our ranch, my wife and I moved back to South Dakota in 1994, and in 96 we acquired some land, and we then started an operation up there. And then when my youngest son graduated from college in 2009, then we started expanding the operation. He really runs the business, and I'll talk about that a little bit more as well. So I want to talk a little bit about the people here, because obviously none of this would happen without having these people and having people that are capable of getting things done. So I want to start out in the upper left. That's my wife, Arlene. We've actually been married since 1972. So I guess we're coming up on 49 years. And she is kind of the hub of everything we do, because I've continued to have jobs off the ranch, but we've actually grown the ranch quite a bit in the last 20 years as well. If you transition down on the lower right, that's my son, John. John runs the business up there. He's the ranch manager. He actually worked in the AI industry for a period of time when he was in high school and after high school. So he's an experienced AI technician and has a lot of experience in all of these kinds of projects that we actually do there as well. The two people you see in the bottom left there, we have two. The gentleman is Colton Avishan. Colton's my co-author on the work that we've actually done. He actually, at this stage in time when we took this picture, he was an intern at our ranch and worked on this project in the summer of 2019. And then later on, he started graduate school with us. So he's actually a graduate student here in animal science at Kansas State University. The young lady on the left is Claiborne Bronkhorst. Claiborne, or Clay, is a veterinary student at the University of Wisconsin in her second year of veterinary school. When this project was happening, they were our two summer interns. We've had an internship program since 2014. We try to take 2 interns in the spring semester, 2 in the summer, and 2 in the fall. In fact, we have 2 at the ranch right now. There are 32nd and 33rd interns since 2014. So this has been a program that we are very proud of. We've learned a lot in doing that. We've had lots and lots of very good students who are now doing a lot of different things in the industry as well. So I did want to mention the people, because these are the ones that really get things done. Okay, a little more on our cattle business. We are a commercial operation. This is not a registered cow herd. We run commercial cows. Our breeding program is we are primarily Angus and Sim Angus. I would say our genetic makeup is roughly 3/4 Angus and 1/4 Sim Angus. And we're trying to move more in the direction of the Sim Angus and trying to add a little more heterosis to our cow herd. We are a spring calving operation. We generally start calving heifers about the 20th to the 25th of March, and our cows about the 1st of April. And so we would have most of our cows calved by the 1st of June. And then normally we sell about half of our calves off the cow in the fall, and then the other half in the spring after a backgrounding period. That gets adjusted a little bit at times, but that's generally how we're actually operating. We do operate on a lot of leased land in both North and South Dakota. And so we do a lot of work in a lot of different areas. So we pull portable corrals around quite a bit as well. And the summer project, we'll get into that in just a little more detail. I mentioned this kind of breed makeup of what we've been doing. We really have had an AI program going back to 1997 at this particular location. We've used a lot of Angus bulls and a few Simmental Angus bulls, and we've pretty much invested in trying to build a pretty good cow herd. And so I'm just showing you a few pictures here of some of the cows that we would actually have or did have in our system. Some of these are gone now because they're old enough to be gone. And I'm also trying to show you some of the country that we run in. So we are about an 18-inch rainfall area. So we don't get a lot of snow in the winter, even though we're quite a ways up north because we're a bit arid. So we need cattle that can really manage and handle in that kind of environment. So that's always been an important consideration for us as well. Some of the country we run in is pretty rough, and it can make it a little difficult to do roundups and do a lot of AI programs when we're really trying to handle cattle several times through the chute. Okay, moving on more specifically into what we actually did then in 2019. In working with Dr. Arnett, what we decided to do is we would use a sex semen maternal bull on our heifers and our 2-year-olds, and we would use a terminal sire on with male semen on our mature cows. And so that was basically the plan. So we ended up synchronizing and breeding heifers or cows in 4 different locations. And we had a yearling heifer group, and those were actually done in our dry lot at home. And then the 2-year-olds and the 2-year-old group had a few cows that were 3s and 4s in as well. And then the others were actually mature cows. So these were all synchronized and inseminated. And then we ultrasounded those somewhere between 60 and 90 days of pregnancy to assess both our synchronized pregnancy rates, and we actually were picking up the second round of breedings then as well. So that's kind of the nature of the program that we actually had. And I'll go through these kind of group by group. We have these 4 different groups. So the first group is our heifers. And we've actually used MGA and prostaglandin on our heifers for a long, long time. That's our favorite system. It happens to be, I have a little background in that system at Colorado State University. And what we do is we feed MGA for 14 days. We then, I think I've got some more pictures on here. We then wait 19 days and we inject PGF2 alpha. And in our case, we heat detect and then we inseminate. And I'll tell you a little more about how we actually did this, but just a little more background on why this system is designed the way it is. Back in the 80s, we learned that the day of the cycle that heifers are on, when they receive prostaglandin, has both a large influence on if they come in heat and also how fertile they are if they do in fact come in heat. So this whole system was designed so that the PGF2 alpha injection is being given to late cycle heifers. That's the whole design of the entire system. And so this system has been around. We published our first paper on this system in 1986. And it's still used to some degree, although I think a lot of, there's been a fair number of folks now that use a 14-day cedar in place of that 14-day MGA. So this is what we actually used on our heifers. We did heat check our heifers very intensively, including into the night at different times, so every 4 hours. And then we inseminated heifers 15 to 21 hours after we detected them in estrus. So we're pushing that a little later than what we would normally do in our breed by heat kinds of programs. We did have EstraTech patches on these, so we did use those as an aid in our heat detection program. Okay, I also wanted to show you then what we did on the cows. So with the cows, we used a co-sync with cedar program, but we actually had 2 different split time AI groups and 1 fixed time AI group. So, and by the way, we did not set this up to really compare those groups. That really wasn't our intent. We probably weren't really capable of doing that in what a scientist might consider to be a really sound way. We simply had cattle in several different groups, and we used the program that we could most effectively get done in that particular group. Many of you who've done this with cows know that you got several roundups here, and sometimes those are not always easy to get done. So we had a fixed time AI group. That group would have got inseminated about 70 hours after cedar removal and PGF2 alpha. And anything that was in heat, we just inseminated. If they had not yet shown heat, they got GnRH and then we inseminated. So that was our fixed time. Then we also had 1 group that we did split time, where we at 70 hours, we inseminated everything that was in heat. And then 12 hours later, we brought those back through that had not been in heat. If they had active patches, we inseminated them. If they didn't, we gave GnRH and inseminated them. And then we had the last group, we did the same thing, but we did it at 24 hours instead of actually at 12 hours. So I'll show you the results of those groups, but I don't want to get into comparing these systems very much because I don't think what we actually did was really designed to make really good comparisons of the different systems. Okay, I said earlier we used 2 of your bulls. We used Keneally Maternal Maid, and Aaron's recommendation was that bull, and part of it was I think you folks had some data, you had some evidence that actually showed that this bull had pretty good fertility with sex semen. And that was important to us. It was actually important for the study. So we used this bull on both our heifers. We had 101 heifers. And we also used it on our young cows, our 2-year-olds. And as I mentioned earlier, we had a few 3- and 4-year-olds in that particular bunch of cows. And so that was heifer semen from this particular bull that went into our heifers and our young cows. If you look at our older cows, we used a Charolais bull called Milestone, your bull. We used male semen, and then we used him on 168 mature cows in 2 different locations. And then one of those was a split time AI group, and the other one was a fixed time AI group. And Aaron can correct this if I'm wrong, but I think I'm right. At the time we used him, I don't think we had any real data on how successful we would expect him to be with synchronization programs with sex semen. Okay, we're going to move into our results. And the first group that I want to report on is our yearling heifers. And by the way, we've synchronized yearling heifers for a long, long time. And we generally, with our MGA program, get along quite well with that. But we do, I'm a little old fashioned in this. I actually prefer to heat check. I like to see heifers stand, and I like to breed heifers that I know have been standing. So we used an MGA prostaglandin system, as I mentioned. We bred them about 15 to 21 hours after we first saw standing heat. The AI Sire was maternal made. We got about 95% of those heifers to actually show heat. And again, we're breeding by heat. And we got 63.4% of the heifers pregnant AI. And we had cleanup bulls out with these, but they were only out for 1 additional cycle. And we ended up with 87% then for our pregnancy rate. And we were, quite pleased with this, but we also have a lot of experience doing this with conventional semen, but this was our first endeavor with gender selected semen. But we were really quite pleased with this, the results we actually saw here. So we did get a lot of these heifers in heat. And by the way, these heifers probably weigh about 850. And when we're breeding them, our program is normally we like to have our heifers about 850 pounds about the time we're breeding them. We like to have them 1,200 pounds at calving, when they're calving as 2-year-olds for the first time. So we're on a project, another project where we weigh all our cattle in the fall. So we do have a pretty good sense of what our weights are actually looking like. Okay, the second group we're going to talk about are our 2-year-olds. And I mentioned we had 51 in this group, and 8 of these were actually 3- and 4-year-olds. So I just call this the young cow group, or 2-year-olds. So again, these are synchronized with a co-sync with cedar. And in this particular group, this is a split time AI group. So 24 hours. So we would have put the cedars in, and then after the cedars are actually removed, we're breeding at about 70 hours. Everything that was in heat to that point in time gets inseminated. If they weren't, we're turning those back out. 24 hours later, we're putting them back in. If they're in heat, we breed them. If they don't have an activated patch, we give GnRH and breed them. So we ended up with a 88% estrus response. That's now the sum of the 2 times, so the 70 hours plus 24 hours later, and then an AI pregnancy rate of about 47% and a breeding season pregnancy rate of about 92. This is a longer breeding season here than what we actually have on the heifers. We're probably around a 60 or 65 day, maybe even 70 day breeding season in this particular bunch. Now moving on to the mature cows. So, and we have 2 sets of mature cows that are out actually in different pastures. This is again a split time AI group. It's co-sync with cedar, split time AI, but this one is 12 hours after the 70 hours. So basically roughly 82 hours is when we're bringing those back in. And actually this particular group of cows was close to home. So when we kept them in, we could actually put them into our dry lot facility and actually keep them there for that 12-hour period. So it made it a little easier in this setting than in some of our bigger, more remote pastures that we actually have. So the AI sire here is the Charolais bull. This is male semen. We got 75% of these showing estrus, and we got 45% AI pregnancy rate. And then our breeding season pregnancy rate was about 92%. And then the last group, whoops, what happened there? Here we go. I don't know what was in the middle there, but something. So the last group we had, this is a group at a pasture that we rent that's actually quite a ways from our home location. We had 88 cows in this group, another co-sync with cedar. These are a fixed time AI. So we bred everything that was in heat at about 70 hours. And then if they had not shown signs of estrus, they got GnRH and we bred them at that same time. So it's a fixed time AI program. We got about 69% in heat and about 40% of these pregnant AI with a little over 90% for our breeding season. And against this is also the milestone, the Charolais bull milestone male semen that we're actually breeding these with. And by the way, Colton had put together the data. I didn't actually put it in, but in all of these groups, then we did end up with. So if it was milestone male semen, we did end up with some heifer calves. And if it was maternal made heifer semen, we did end up with some bull calves as well. I'm just going to say roughly in the 10% kind of category is about where we were. I didn't actually put that data in, but it's kind of roughly in that area. So that's the results of our 4, I'll call them groups of cattle that we use programs on. And I don't want to imply here that those are kind of worthy comparisons between synchronization systems, because to have a really good experimental design and synchronization systems, we really have to have equal numbers of similar kinds of cows in each of those treatments. And that's really not what we actually have. But what I'd really like to do is shift gears a little bit, and I'd like to talk a little bit about, and this is my word, economic thoughts, because I've given this some thought, but have not, as of this time, done a lot of analysis on this. I really think this is worthy of some very serious analysis. I think the opportunity for gender-selected semen male in terminal sire programs is significant and really deserves some real, I'll call it, thorough exploration of what the opportunities here might be. So one of the things we do in our system, here's just a picture of some of the Charolais sired calves. So this was done in 2019, and then in 2020, all of our calves, in fact, we weigh everything in September as part of another project that we're participating in. So all of our calves were weighed in September. And you can see some of the Charolais calves here. They would all be out of black cows, Angus and Sim Angus cows. And then I'm reporting something here, and this is kind of a lead in now to where I'm headed with you on kind of the economic side. So we weigh all of our calves in September. Probably they average roughly 6 months of age at that point in time. And what I actually did for these groups is I created a 200-day adjusted calf weight. And this is only adjusted for calf age. I'm not trying to adjust for cow age, because what I'm really interested in here ultimately is can we produce more pounds of calf? And what is the value of those additional pounds of calf? And what's the cost of actually achieving that? That's where we're really kind of headed with this analysis. So the yearling heifers, when these calves were weighed, they would have been now 2.5 years old roughly. And and these are heifer calves now. The heifer calves weighed just under 500 pounds. Those out of the young cows, mostly 2-year-olds, again, Angus sired heifer calves weighed just a hair over 500 pounds. Now we get into the mature cows, and we have the two groups. GA for us stands for Grazing Association, and Umber is the other group we actually have. Both of those groups, the milestone calves now, and these are steers, are coming in around 600 pounds. 600 pounds, and again, that's adjusted to calf age, but not adjusted for anything else. But the point that I'm kind of getting to here is this is a lot of difference. This is a lot of difference in pounds, and ultimately could be, I think, quite significant economically. But if I take you to the next slide, if I need to make sure I explain this weight advantage that we're actually seeing. So part of this is because these are is a Charolais sire. So if you take the cross-breed EPD between Charolais and Angus, we would, the one I just looked up was about 28 pounds, but we would expect these Charolais sired calves to be heavier. They do have a heterosis advantage as well, because they're of a different breed than either of the breeds that make up our cow herd. And now these are out of mature cows, okay? And we would expect calves born to mature cows to be heavier than calves born to first calf heifers or second calf heifers. And I also need to point out that the steers in our system, the steers are implanted and the heifers are not actually implanted. So that obviously gives a competitive advantage on the steer side, is what it actually does. But the question is really about, if we start to skew the distribution, the gender distribution in favor of the steer calves, what is the benefits associated with that? What's the economic benefit associated with that? And what's actually the cost of doing it? And that's something that I'm keenly interested in and working on and trying to understand. And as we look at it, kind of in a real world setting, in our kind of ranching environment there in north central South Dakota. Now, I want to point out something that I just don't think that many people are really aware of. The spread in the price between steer and heifer calves has actually been changing, and it's actually been changing for some time. This comes out of our superior livestock analysis, but if you go back even just 15 years to 2006, and these are calves that are being sold at about 580 pounds. The average weight, steer price was about $5 per hundredweight higher than heifers. If you go to 2010, steers were up about $10 per hundredweight. 2017, steers were up about $15 per hundredweight. In 2020, steers are up about $17 per hundredweight. So why is the spread between steers and heifers, why is it changing? Why is it moving in that direction? What's actually causing this? What is the market actually responding to? I think it's primarily the desire and what we are facing right now are much heavier cattle actually going to slaughter than we did several years ago. Carcass weights have been going up at roughly 6 pounds a year. This is from our Kansas State University, what we call Focus on Feedlots report that comes out every month. And I just pulled up the most recent one that I saw posted on the K-State website. This is 6 feedlots in western Kansas that actually feed a lot of cattle, and they report their data into a K-State system. But in December 2020, the steers that were sold weighed 1,478 pounds, the heifers 1,294 pounds. Now it's possible we've got some COVID influence on this, but I can't tell you for sure. But the point that I'm actually getting at is live weight or carcass weight goes up at slaughter, the relative difference between the steers and heifers actually increases. So the value at slaughter differences increase, the value of feeder cattle actually changes as well. So if you think that we're going to stay killing cattle at these really, really high weights, I would argue that we're going to continue to see these significant price spreads between steers and heifers. And what that does is it makes the economics of a program that skews the gender in the direction of steers, more steers and fewer heifers. It creates some additional economic opportunity. Now, the other point that I want to make, and this really struck me when I happened to be up at the ranch in November, sitting in a livestock auction market. You can learn a lot sitting in a livestock auction market. And it just really struck me that the heifer calves, compared to the steer calves, that spread was even greater. And it didn't feel like the steer calves were bringing more. It just felt like the heifers were bringing a whole lot less. So what changed between last summer and maybe November or December, maybe even today? Well, I'll tell you what changed, and it's had a lot of effect. This is the price of corn, okay? And it shows the price of corn back in, this happens to be the close-up futures today, so it's not actually the cash price, but it's representative of the changes in the price of corn. If you go back to the beginning of this time period, September, in fact, my brother was selling corn in September, and he tried to sell me a truckload for $2.40 a bushel, and I was not smart enough to say, I better go ahead and buy that truckload of corn, okay? And this is in the Dakotas, where the price of corn relative to, say, the plains of Kansas is quite a bit cheaper to begin with. But between that period of time and when we got into 2021 to now, corn prices have actually gone up about $2. So what happens is the advantage that steers have over heifers in feedlot performance and the ability to go to heavier carcass weights is actually greater in the era of high-priced corn. So I think high-priced corn actually makes the spread between steers and heifers even greater and may add advantage to the steer calves. So I think these are a couple of factors that are really actually having some significant effects out there. And what we're seeing, I have to tell you, when I sold the steers, and I think I put this in the report if you've actually seen the report, but I looked at this was about mid-November, and I looked at what I felt like I could get for heifer calves at that time, and I thought the differences might be as much as $190 a head. So it was a lot, and of course the heifer calves were lighter as well, but a lot of it was the heifer calves were just a lot cheaper than the steer calves actually were. So where does this take us to? Well, what I think it does is I think the possibilities with sex semen, male semen, terminal sire kind of program are a significant opportunity. I do think this requires a little more analysis than what I've actually done. And if you were to say, are you ready to go that direction on your ranch in South Dakota? I would actually say not quite. We have been in the business, like I suspect many of you and maybe a lot of your customers have been. If I describe the AI business in commercial beef production, if we go back to the 80s when I was really heavily involved, the reason most people used AI, and they used AI on their heifers, was for calving aids. But at that time, we were having a lot of calving difficulty. I can remember when I was at Colorado State University, situations where we might assist 40% of our heifers, and we might expect 5% C-sections. And that was not abnormal at that point in time in history. So a big driver with AI and heifers was in fact when we could be confident that we can use proven bulls and we're not going to have a lot of dystocia or calving difficulty. As we moved further into the 90s and maybe into the 2000s, calving difficulty became a bit less of an issue. And what I've observed is that most people that use AI in commercial operations now are interested more in the heifers they're producing and the females they're producing and the females they're raising. And in many cases, the steers have kind of become a byproduct of the operation as opposed to what people are really trying to primarily produce. I think we see that a lot. I think it continues today. And we've certainly been in our history a bit like that on some of our ranching kind of situations. We used a lot of Angus bulls. We've used Sim-Angus bulls. And part of where I'm at in this whole thinking too is that there's also an awful lot of people who are in the business of using AI to produce and sell bred heifers. What does that actually do to the price of bred heifers? It drives the price of bred heifers down. So it makes me think perhaps we might be better off buying heifers and going to a terminal sire kind of program, especially if we can skew that gender substantially in the direction of bull calves. So that's a bit where my thinking is. I'm actually looking forward to this dialogue tonight. I'm hoping that many of you probably have thoughts on this issue, but I know that the sex semen market is enormously a heifer market as opposed to a steer market in commercial settings. I do know a few people that use male semen just to produce more bulls when they're selling bulls, but I think that's a rather small share of the market. So with that, what I'd like to do, Haley, is just stop and then be happy to take any questions that anyone might have or listen to comments as well, if anyone would like to bring up any thoughts on anything that I've talked about.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Odde. At this time, we'll open it up for questions. So if anyone has any questions for Dr. Odde or, about his presentation or his research, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask him, or you can type your question in the chat and I'll read it off to you.
Dr. Odde, for your presentation. This is Aaron. One of the things that I think is unique about sex semen is that in Animal Science 101 in beef cattle production, we learn what breeds are used for, what breeds of cattle are good at and what they are not good at. And I think you've done a really nice job of touching on some of that this evening. And I think it's important to maybe touch on some things that you haven't realized yet in your cow herd that you will when you get these replacement females back in there. But talk a little bit about the value of keeping the terminal sire out of your cow herd. I think it's great that you've capitalized on the Charolais sired steers and there's a market advantage there, but what could be the long-term advantage of keeping the terminal breeds out of the cow herd?
Yeah, I'm actually happy to talk about that, and I'll let you answer the question of which are the terminal breeds, because I don't think anybody wants to admit that they're a terminal breed, and we probably all have views on that. But obviously, I think the maternal traits are really, really important, and probably the maternal traits that I'm most interested in are fertility and longevity. And we know that we can contribute to those both through the heterosis side and then the direct additive genetic side as well. So one of the things that I'm interested in right now is I don't think we've done as an industry I don't think we've done a very good job of utilizing heterosis. In fact, I've had this discussion with a lot of people. I did an article a few years ago called Heterosis Underutilized. And in fact, my animal breeder colleagues, and I see maybe one of those online who might like to comment about this, tend to give a lot of breeding system kinds of talks, but it doesn't seem to me like it changes the behavior of very many people who are actually in the business. So, but I really do believe, having cows that are productive in the long term is a really big thing. And I'm not suggesting we would try to ignore that. What I'm actually suggesting is that we may be able to stay close with a modest investment. That's the way I'm actually kind of looking at this. But I do think, just to be more direct here on the Angus bull, this maternal made bull, we really like his calves. We really like those calves in this cow herd. It's just that when you're producing heifers and you're producing heifers out of young females, you're going to have some substantial weight disadvantages. And not all heifers get to be sold as replacement females. In fact, the percentage of them that actually do is pretty small. It's really pretty small of a total. I might also mention that in our superior livestock data analysis, and this started, we've been in that business a long time. And as Angus started to kind of dominate in the market, particularly in the 90s, the price advantage for, first of all, for black calves and then for Angus sired calves was pretty significant. And what we've seen more recently is when we separate that into steers and heifers, actually the Charolais sired calves have a price advantage over the other breeds on the steer side. Actually, they're equal to Simmental sired, but they're higher than Angus sired. And then on the heifer side, of course, as you would expect, these terminal breeds, they have more discounts on the female side. And of course, Red Angus are the highest priced heifers on the female side. So I don't want to de-emphasize maternal traits. I think one of the other challenges we have, though, Aaron, is it seems to me that we're pretty good with these terminal traits. We're pretty good with understanding growth, being able to predict growth, and carcass traits. Similarly, I think these maternal traits, especially longevity, are much harder to actually get your arms around. If that cow lasts another year, and that is an average across a herd, then that's a really big deal. That's actually a really big deal in a commercial cow-calf setting. And so I think kind of being able to get kind of economic numbers around that, I think is really important. So I'll stop there, and you may have your comments you want to share, or you might want to dispute what I said. So anyway, I'll just stop.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Odde. We have a question, or a couple questions in the chat. The first one reads, have you seen any data on whether a bred heifer, bred AI, gets a premium over a natural service?
Okay, so the question, you probably heard that question. Have we seen any data that where the heifer bred AI brings a premium over a heifer that was natural service? Is that what the question was? Haley, was that the question?
Sorry, yes, sir. Let me read it one more time. It says, have you seen any data on whether a bred heifer, bred AI, gets a premium over a natural service?
Well, I can give you, I'm trying to think of data. We have a paper coming out probably in the next month where we've looked at, with the superior data, where we've actually looked at factors influencing the price of bred heifers and then factors influencing the price of bred cows. We don't have enough. There are lots in there that are identified as AI bred, but we don't really have enough of that to sort those pieces out. I think if I go back to my roots in I'll call it the South Dakota area, and this would be anecdotal, but certainly anecdotally, there is evidence of heifers that are bred AI, I think bringing more money. I can't give you any kind of a study on that right now, but in that part of the world, and Aaron kind of knows that part of the world, we do have a lot of heifers that are bred for sale. Most of those would be bred AI. A lot of those are sold towards the end of the year, or a lot of people also use that to push revenue into the next year. It's a means of deferring revenue and has some tax advantages to be able to do that. So we see a lot of those kinds of operations and a lot of those kinds of businesses. But that's also why, I had a guy tell me one time that, one of the best things you can do is just be doing things different than your neighbors. Because if your neighbors are all doing one thing, there's probably opportunity in doing something else. So that's probably how I would respond to that question.
Great, thank you.
Hi, Ken. This is Mike McNeil.
Yep, I can see you, Mike.
So I was really curious when I saw the post about the success of sex semen producing the desired gender, and I think you touched on that. You touched a lot about, or said a lot about heterosis, and I think the research data pretty conclusively says if you can capture all of the heterosis available, that's worth somewhere's 25% increase in weaning weight per cow exposed. Now about 2/3 of that increase is probably due to maternal heterosis effects on fertility, and also some effect on longevity, perhaps. You allude to that to some extent. There was a question in the chat I saw pop up that talked about using F1 heifers in a terminal program. I think that's a really realistic thing to do. As you get to be our age, if you can buy those bred heifers and never have to calve another heifer, that's a good thing. But to capture all the heterosis depends on having crossbred females,
Yeah.
and in fact F1 females.
Yeah.
And I know you're trying to move the program in that direction with the Sim Angus piece.
Yep.
But to get all that 25% increase that's due to heterosis, you'd have to get some F1 females working somehow.
Yeah, let me respond to that. And I've actually had this conversation with several people here. I'm struggling with that 25%, and part of that is watching neighbors that have straight bred Angus cows, even preg testing some of those. I just don't think the fertility differences today are that big. Now, I'm still a huge advocate of heterosis. I just think the effects may not be as big as they're being described as. Okay, that's going to be kind of. In fact, I just had this discussion at some length with a colleague, and so it's to me, it's obviously some of the kind of work. Some of that's really old literature. And I'm struggling with that a little bit. We don't have any trouble getting cows pregnant. I would just tell you that a pregnancy rate, and by the way, we're usually a 90-day breeding season. We're usually not a 60-day. I like pregnant cows. I like pregnant cows better than open cows, even if they're late bred. Okay, we want to have those kind of cows. To me, Mike, though, getting the heterosis right in the cow herd, this is where I'm curious, get your thoughts on the F1 versus let's say it's the Sim Angus that is produced in a Sim Angus, I'll call it production system. So in other words, we're using Sim Angus bulls, and we're ending up with let's say a 50% Angus, 50% Simmental, what percentage of that F1 heterosis are we getting?
So that composite, that two breed composite gives you 50% heterosis.
Okay.
Okay, as opposed to the F1 that gives you 100%. I think the big,
Is that heterosis for that pounds of calf wean per cow exposed?
that's heterosis for anything. I think the big thing about the reproductive thing has more to do with the length of the breeding season. Many of those studies that talk about that magnitude of heterosis effect would have had 42-day breeding seasons or 45-day breeding seasons.
Yeah.
If you go longer, obviously you get more cows bred.
Yep.
I think that's intuitively obvious. I think the heterosis advantage for fertility, I think is still there. And I think there's a lot of good biological reasons why it is. But I think the way that you're going to take advantage of that is by tightening up your calving season down quite a bit. And whether or not that's workable on anybody's ranch, I don't know.
I think it may be a good genetic decision. It's a lousy economic decision. Okay. And that's what I think is the important point here. You know, I used to have people say, when you got a cow in the chute in the fall and she's going to calve late, do you cull that cow or do you keep that cow? To me, it's an economic decision. If I think my investment in her over the next year is going to get paid back with the calf she has, I'll keep the cow. If I don't think it will get paid back with this investment over the year, I sell the cow. Okay, but it isn't a rule. It's where I think people make the mistake is they think that's a genetic decision, that I'm making long-term genetic advance doing that. It's an economic decision.
Yeah, I agree with how that decision gets made. Absolutely. I do think, Ken, there's an organization in Canada that runs in pretty tough country too called Beef Booster. And I analyzed some data for them some time ago. And they were running 32-day breeding seasons and getting 80 to 87% pregnancy rates in those breeding seasons with a lot of heterosis in the cow herd. Yeah. So I think it can be done. The achievement of decently respectable pregnancy rates can be done in short breeding seasons, but it takes a commitment to do it, and you got to have the right cows.
Yeah. Well, I would say, what my lessons have been, we have a lot of people that I know that pull bulls. We don't pull bulls, okay? Because my experience has been in the last 20 years is it's rare for an open cow to be worth more than a bred cow. And therefore, if I can have a bred cow, I want a bred cow, okay? So there may be times, and there may have been times when open cows were worth more than bred cows, but it's rare. It's rare. So
I'd agree with that.
Haley, do you have any other questions?
Yes, we do. Dr. Odde, the question that Michael was just referring to in the chat, you pretty much covered it, but just in case there's anything you want to add to it, it reads, talking maternal and making replacement heifers, how do you feel about F1 baldies and using a terminal sire on them? So do you have any final comments on that question?
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I think that's to me, that's where you get, and I think Dr. McNeil would agree with that. That's the heterosis ideal there, having those F1s and coming back with a terminal sire.
Great, thank you. The next question in the chat says, how does he feel the conception was affected using sex semen versus the historical averages of his conventional semen?
Well, the way I would actually describe that is if I give you kind of anecdotal answers, if we go back, if we look at our heifers and how we typically do with heifers and how we did this year or in 2019 with that with the program, that's probably close to about the same thing we've been doing with conventional semen in our heifers. We've probably been doing a little better in our cows. Our cows, we probably average closer to 50%, maybe a little over 50%. I would tell you, we've probably hit upper 50s a few times, but we don't hit those 60% plus that you see in the literature sometimes. So that's not where we have typically been in our program, but we've been in that, probably mid 50s at times. And that would be with a cedar co-sync time breeding at 66 hours kind of a program if we're actually comparing to things we've done in previous years. We've not yet used the Missouri 7-7, but we're actually looking at that program for our system this summer. So that's something that we're actually considering at this point in time.
I would just follow up on Dr. Odde's response there. It's a really good question about the difference between conventional and sex semen, especially when you're talking about synchronizing and breeding large groups of animals. Kind of what we're learning is there's a pretty significant bull effect in this data, and I think it's borne out in just this small data set that Dr. Odde presents. So what we're learning is there are bulls that perform just about as well in sex semen as they do conventional semen, and maternal made was a good example of that. The Charolais bull that we used was not quite as good in sex semen as we would expect him to be in conventional semen. And that's a little bit a result of we didn't have a lot of data on that bull before we used him in this research project. But I would just follow up with that answer to say that there's a pretty significant bull effect. We're learning more about that. We're doing a lot of research about that at STgenetics, and our sales force has some really good knowledge of which bulls have a kind of a track record of performing well in sex semen. So if you're interested in using a bull in sex semen, talk to our folks before you just order a bull, because they really know the bulls that kind of have good field results.
Great, thank you, Aaron.
I really appreciate that.
Dr. Odde, the next question says, on the fixed time AI set of cows, did you use sex semen on everything or just the ones that had an activated STgetech patch?
We use sex semen on everything. So what we did is at the fixed time AI, we would have inseminated everything, and those that did not have activated patches got GnRH at that time then too. But we would have went ahead and inseminated the entire group.
Great, thank you. Another question in the chat says, what do you feel the price advantage per head has to be to offset the added cost of sex semen and the decrease in conception using sex semen?
Say that one more time. I was thinking of something and might have missed something.
Nope, you're good. This one's from Justin, and it says, what do you feel the price advantage per head has to be to offset the added cost of sex semen and the decrease in conception using sex semen?
Okay, so here's my thought on that, and I'll probably say something that goes beyond. So it's really kind of getting to the heart of whether or not this pays or doesn't pay. So the thing that I've been thinking about is, from an AI company perspective, when you, and keep in mind my background, I worked in the animal health industry for several years. And so I learned a lot about how we price products in animal health. And one of the things that rarely has a whole lot of influence on how we price products is our cost of producing those. Okay? In fact, we produced some products that we produced at a loss because they were part of a package and customers expected that to come along. We also produced some products that had huge margins, but that's because the marketplace saw a lot of value in those. So part of what I've been thinking about with gender selected semen is, you know, there's a cost side, and I understand that, and you guys know the cost side far better than I know the cost side, but there's also a benefit side. And the magnitude of the benefit is going to be different in different market segments, okay? So when we're talking about male sex semen in terminal sire programs, that is not a high dollar seed stock kind of a business. In fact, it's not even a business where you're breeding heifers and hoping to sell, say, AI bred heifers with gender selected fetuses in them, and you could think you can sell those for, say, $300 or $400 over some kind of market average. There you can sit down and you can justify that $40 or $45 that you might put into gender selected semen. In the male terminal sire kind of thing, I think the semen price has to come down. And I think it has to be thought of as a different market segment. If you're going to really go after that market segment, this is going to be a more price sensitive market segment than either of the other two that I mentioned, which is really seed stock. And the other one is, I'll call it, it's heifer semen that may go into commercial heifers, but they're heifers that are intended to be sold and marketed and anticipate some kind of competitive advantage. So that's how I'm actually looking at this. And I've shared some of this with Aaron, kind of my thoughts on this thing. I doubt that this market will grow at $40 or $45 a unit of semen. Now, what I would say this: if in fact the conception rates go up, and if they go up significantly, then there's probably more market opportunity too. But you know, where we're kind of operating now, I think what's ultimately going to happen for this to grow, and competition tends to do this, is you may very well see some prices come down. And I'm not trying to lobby in any direct way here. Obviously, you guys run your business and you charge what you think is appropriate for a product, and I respect that.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Odde. Do we have any more questions?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Wonderful. Thank you. I might have missed the point. So I've looked at doing a sex sorted semen program before, but just given there wasn't a lot of good numbers out there, I suppose, on what you could expect for conception with a good sync program. But and like I say, I might have missed it. So back to your point that it was close to 50%. Would we still not be farther ahead to use a conventional semen, get a little bit higher conception, and just take the other sex as it were, versus just getting a 50% conception, but having the gender selected a little bit closer? I might have missed where our advantage is, where we would have gained any advantage in using the gender sort.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So the way I would actually respond to that, in this analysis that I'm working on with a couple of colleagues, we are actually we're actually working on a variety of different kinds of questions. But what you're really bringing to the table here is what we call it's really getting the key, the most important cost and revenue estimates that are part of the analysis. And then it's a sensitivity analysis, which really asks the question, how important is that? So let's say in this case, we did a sensitivity analysis, and the question is actually, it's AI conception rate. And so let's say we compare maybe 40, 45%, 50, 55%. And when we actually do that, we can see how critical that is to the in-game profitability. And that's the kind of analysis that I think ultimately still here has to be done, because the other thing we can do the same kind of sensitivity analysis on the cost of the semen. When you think about this, I did another kind of crude exercise here, and I didn't put it in my report, but I did just a revenue side kind of thing. And I just said, if we had a herd producing 500 calves, and if we skewed gender to 350 steer calves on 150 heifer calves, and we just sold everything off the cow in the fall, if we went to that kind of gender makeup in a 500 cow calf situation, we would actually change revenue about $40,000. Okay, so we'd have about $40,000 more in a cow herd that produced 350 steers and 150 heifers than one that produced 250 and 250. So then the question is that $40,000, is it enough to offset the costs associated with attempting to do that? And the answer to that is I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it is or not. I do think this is the kind of thing that has a lot of potential. And keep this in mind, if we keep taking carcass weights up, that's going to continue to spread the value between steers and heifers. If corn prices stay high, that's also going to spread the value between steers and heifers. So there's a lot of moving pieces to this entire equation here. I don't really think we're going to see big change in the short term, but I think long term here we could see substantial change. I really think that's a real possibility. You know, man, if we study the hog industry, you know, and I know a lot of us probably don't want to see happen to the beef industry what happened to the hog industry, but you know, they're not selling a whole lot of $1 million boar pigs anymore, okay, or $100,000 boar pigs. So the point that I'm actually kind of getting to is, you know, the more we move in that direction, the more the genetic pieces here. I think another way of saying this is, if we're selling genetics, we have to constantly earn whatever we're receiving for those genetics. And I think seed stock producers understand this completely. AI companies understand this completely. You compete in an environment and you've got to be able to earn that place at the table all the time.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Odde. Another question from the chat. It reads, after the results, would it be more beneficial to use sex semen on older heifers or cows, or did it make a difference?
Okay, the part of the question I'm just a little fuzzy on is older heifers. What is that? What exactly, do you know what we mean? Maybe someone could speak up and say what they're think older heifers meaning what? Aaron, can you help with the translation here? Or I'm not quite sure what that means.
All right, I'm with you.
I'm not the person that asked the question, but I guess I would, if I had to interpret that, I would say the person is asking about maybe a population of replacement heifers that have a greater degree of cyclicity to them, would be what I think probably that person is coming from.
Okay, well, what I would actually say is, and by the way, I'm been around about as long as Dr. McNeil, but one thing I would actually say is that there was a time when in our industry, when age of puberty was a really important factor in how successful we were at getting heifers pregnant. And my experience now is that's rarely a problem. I would say in our heifers, we rarely have trouble getting heifers cycling and actually getting them pregnant. Maybe you still see that in some locations, but I don't think a whole lot. There was a time when we used to have, my team did something at Colorado State. We developed something called a reproductive tract score, which is really a way of assessing pubertal status in heifers. We used that for many years. Dr. Brinks and some of his folks looked at genetic relationships with that. It was a pretty good measure of age of puberty. But what I would actually say is age of puberty as a barrier to reproduction is rare in my experience over the last several years.
Great, thank you. Another question from Michael McNeil. Do you think there is an upper limit to cow size in your environment? Would there be value in carrying a few more slightly smaller cows bred to extreme high growth potential terminal sires?
Okay, well, the way I would actually respond to that is I've actually kind of quit worrying about cow size. Now, Mike might have fell off his chair about this time, but if he'll have time to climb back on. But what part of this, again, this comes down to an economic issue. What happens is we rent a lot of pasture. Most of the pasture that we rent is on a cow-calf pair basis. Now, what I'm actually going to tell you is our cows, by a lot of standards, are pretty big. Okay, so, and we weigh our cows, so we actually know this. So 1,200 pounds when they calve at 2, 1,300 pounds at 3. 5 years and older, they average 1,500 pounds. That's what the average actually is. Angus and Simmental. So yeah, we've been somewhat concerned about that, but it's when you're in the position every year where you're a renter, and you might think, well, establish long-term rental agreements. Well, the marketplace, at least in our world, doesn't typically work that way. In fact, I would say that almost everybody in my part of the region who's grown in the cow business has grown without buying more land, but has grown with leasing more land. And we see the same thing on the farming side. So the farming side has gone the same direction. We see people who have a base of operation, and I have 2 cousins. One of them farms 40,000 acres and one 25,000 acres, and they go over 100 miles from their base of operations to actually farm. We're seeing a lot more of that in the cow business now, where people have a base and they might have pasture leases that are 100 miles away or 50 miles away. And it's very much a year-to-year kind of a system. There's USDA data that suggests that it's somewhere between 40 and 50% of the rangeland in the country is operated under a lease agreement of some kind. So I think this is a really important question because, you know, I think a lot of times when we look at the system analysis, the kinds of things that you have done, Mike, we understand the value of complementarity and the value of even heterosis, but actually making that work in a dynamic environment where, you know, I would say right now, what is it, March 16th? We have almost all of our leases lined up for summer, but we have a few that are kind of still hanging there, kind of loose ends. And so it's, and so our incentive is to put as much weight out there that we think will generate revenue as we can. And I actually did something when I left NDSU, and many of you know Greg Lardy. Greg is now the VP at NDSU, and I had Greg help me, and we put together a spreadsheet. And the spreadsheet showed different cow sizes with different calving dates, and then how much dry matter consumption we could expect from each of those cows going to grass in the summer. So what at that time I was calving 1st of May, and I was trying to convince the people I was renting grass from that I should be able to pay less because my cow and calf were not eating as much as the guy that calved in March. And the reality is I was terribly unsuccessful at convincing any landowner. They mostly just thought I was a goofy college professor, is what they kind of thought. And in the end, I said, I can't change them, so I have to change me. So that's that's kind of a bit of how I would answer that, Mike.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Odde. So we had a comment in our chat from Bred, and it says, at this time in Australia, we have some producers in the area of Wagyu steer production looking at how to best use sex male Wagyu semen to produce more steers. This is driven by the economics of the high value in grain-fed Wagyu carcass that has the right marbling and carcass traits. So this was just a comment, but I feel that this is a good one to kind of wrap up our webinar with. And, you know, I just feel like if you have any comments or suggestions or recommendations on the specific use of sex female versus male semen and how that can really benefit one program versus the next, then would you just kind of wrap up the webinar with giving us your thoughts on the specific uses of both and how you feel they can benefit certain markets and programs?
Okay, well, thank you. And I'd actually be happy to address that, because the one thing I don't want to do is throw cold water in anybody's, I'll call it ideas for a business venture. What happens is there's all kinds of, I'll call them maybe not mainstream kinds of operations that figure out how to do something and figure out how to make money at that. And if they, whatever technology they use, I would say more power to them. That's actually great. And if that individual can capitalize on a Wagyu market, and particularly a Wagyu market that uses steer calves, I would just say more power to that. I think that's actually really healthy for the economy. It's really healthy for people to actually see those kinds of things happen. So, you know, I certainly am not one to say, you know, if somebody has got a really good market for bred heifers or bred cows, and there's a lot of ways of doing this too. Longevity is one of my hot buttons, but I also know ranches that package 9-year-old cows and sell 9-year-old cows in packages, and have a pretty darn good market for 9-year-old cows too. So at the end of the day, I would just say, you know, any way you can figure out how to make things work and make money is actually great. There's one last thing I want to mention, and I think it came up a little bit in my response to Mike's question, but if I've learned anything in the last 20 years about, and I think this is true not just in ranching, but I think in business in general, it's the value of flexibility. And what I learned from watching a lot of people, and I think we do this fairly well, is the whole idea of flexibility. So one thing we have is we built ourselves a small feed yard, and it's a base of operation. And it's 4 or 5 years ago now, we lost a few pasture leases and we dry lotted cows. Well, we put in a lot of feed and we can dry lot cows. And what we're doing is we're responding much more to kind of existing opportunity. We lease a lot of corn stalks in the fall. Last fall, we were very fortunate to get some really good leases, got on them early. The corn was harvested early. It reduced our annual cow costs. Basically, it cost me $1.50 per head per day to feed cows. When I got them on corn stalks, it cost me 70 cents per head per day. So those kinds of things are huge opportunities. And so being an opportunist, being ready to capitalize on the opportunity when it comes, I think that's a really big deal. And by the way, I forgot to say something. Maybe Ryan's still on, but Ryan Effling helped us breed 1 or 2 of those sets of cows last summer. And so thank you, Ryan. And if you're gone off to the bar to have a beer, maybe your colleagues will get to hear your recognition.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Odde. I think that pretty much wraps up tonight's webinar. Oh, wait, sorry. We have one more question in the chat. It comes from Francisco. He's here at our headquarters in Navasota. He says, how do we incentivize people to do more AI overall?
incentivize. I think it has to be, I still think that about the only thing that I really understand is it has to bring added economic value to their business. And that's a challenge. And I think you guys probably see this all the time, but one of the challenges in kind of traditional ranching areas is labor shortages and the ability to kind of get the work done. That's where we've compensated with interns. And so we have interns, we try to hire interns for spring, which is mostly about calving, for summer, which is mostly about our AI programs, for fall, which is, we do a lot of our fall work, process all the calves, wean calves, those kinds of things. Part of what I'm kind of driving to here is the kinds of things that bring people added value. And understanding what their issues are and what their problems actually are. One of the things that's required, as you all well know, if we're gonna process cattle and artificially inseminate a significant number of them, it's good facilities, and it's qualified people, well-trained people, and probably as important as anything, it's really good attitudes. We have portable facilities that we pull around, but so do a lot of other people have portable facilities anymore. I think the labor piece is the really big one. Maybe you want to sponsor an internship program or something where you put out interns on ranches that use artificial insemination and use synchronization and breed a bunch of cows. We've learned a lot on that. I happen to have the good fortune of working here at Kansas State, so most of our interns have been Kansas State students, but not all of them. And the other thing is you got to understand their situation. This is one thing that most people won't do. We take interns that are what I call entirely green, meaning that they don't have to have any experience. And what we find is these are a lot of the people that are really trying to learn. And what I would actually say is that they're highly qualified. Those are actually called employees. They're not interns, okay? So people that want to get a highly qualified individual and call them an intern, that's unfair to the individual, okay? If they're highly qualified, you should call them an employee and you should pay them as such. If they're interns, that by definition, they shouldn't be experienced. And but those are the people that really need the opportunities. And there's a lot of those out there. There's lots of wonderful young people. We see them every day here at the university. So I'll stop there.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Odde. I think from myself and all of our team at STgenetics Beef, we just want to thank you so much for being our guest speaker on tonight's webinar. It really means a lot to us, and you gave a great presentation. And we're just honored that we could have you on tonight's webinar with all of our customers, our team members.